Guys, and welcome to Escape Wheel Watch Reviews. My name is Steve, and today we're going to be reviewing the Vakuy Rigas Chronograph. And from now on, I'm going to be referring to this as the VR chronograph. I purchased this watch with earnings from this channel, so again, thank you guys so much for supporting me. I wouldn't be able to do this without you guys, and this is just proof of it. So if you guys are interested in this watch, I'll be leaving a link down in the video description. You guys won't pay any extra for it. That is an affiliate link, so when you guys do use that link to purchase a watch, I get a little bit of a kickback that keeps the channel running. So again, a huge thank you to anyone who's ever used any of those links. The retail price for this thing is kind of all over the place, but I'm going to settle on right around 75 US dollars. That's before any taxes, sales, coupons, or anything like that. I picked mine up for 55 US dollars during one of the sales late last year, and I do see this in some choice sales for right around 58 US dollars. So if you do some hunting, you can absolutely pick this thing up for under 60 US dollars. Unfortunately, the link that I used for this watch is no longer valid. It's dead. So I'm just going to link another one down there, and I'm linking the one that has the most stock. But definitely do some hunting. You can probably get this thing, hopefully. I know there's just really low stock at the moment for these ones when they're priced at like $58. So yeah, just keep that in mind when you're about to purchase this thing. The watch comes only in this colorway that you see here. There's no black dials, there's no steel bezels or anything like that. They do have this one listed as a 7750. Obviously this one is just a quartz movement, but they do actually sell this watch with an automatic chronograph movement right around 180 US dollars, I think. So if you're interested in that, if you like this watch enough, it might be worth it to jump to that other movement. But this review here will be for the Seiko VK63 version. The watch is made of stainless steel. They don't mention that it's 316L. It probably is. There is an acrylic crystal, a screw-down crown, actually screw-down crowns, screw-down caseback, 50 meters of claimed water resistance, and the watch is powered by the Seiko VK63 Mecha Quartz movement. So there's plenty of Paul Newman Daytona homages out there. I've reviewed a couple already, but this one is actually sized pretty accurately to the original. It's a tiny thing, it's cheap, and it has a very unique feature, I'm going to say, which we'll talk about during the movement section. You might want to stick around until that point. It's kind of a deal breaker, or for me at least. So what about the rest of the watch? I say we dig in, let's find out. But before we do, as usual, do a quick wrist check. Wearing the Ixtao 5303 homage. Still absolutely loving this watch. This has been my go-to like swimming watch, so it's been in tons of water and it's held up great. All right, let's get to the dimensions. Got a diameter of 37.5 millimeters, case thickness of 15.4 millimeters, got 19 millimeter lug width, lug tip to lug tip of 44.1 millimeters, and with all the links on the bracelet, this does fit me. I didn't have to remove any. It weighs 94 grams. So like I mentioned, this thing is pretty much spot on with the diameter of the original Paul Newman Daytona. 37.5, 44 lug to lug, and 19 millimeter lug width. So yeah, it wears very vintage like. And I mean, for what it is, I think it wears pretty good. Obviously 15.5 millimeters thick. That's the big number there. I really think that this is the same case whether they're using the quartz movement or the automatic chronograph. So I think they could definitely shave off 2 millimeters on that case back there and get it closer to the 13.5 of the Rolex. So you know, I think the case shape they actually got pretty good there. I do like the way that it wears for being such a small and short watch. It wears pretty good. It definitely has a real vintage feel to it. So I'm going to go outside right now and throw it on my wrist for you. And here we are on my 7.5 inch wrist, and it is small. Definitely has that, you know, heavy vintage feel to it. Pretty thick, pretty flat as well, but it's pretty short. So, you know, top down, it's going to fit pretty good. But it does feel and look just a little awkward. That's all. Huge taper on the bracelet as well, and yeah, I mean, I still like the way that it looks. I like the way that it wears. But it definitely has a vintage feel for it. Smaller wrists are going to be able to pull this off a little bit better, but I think the thickness actually looks okay on my wrist. Might not look so good on a more skinny wrist, so just keep that in mind. But for the most part, I think it looks all right. I like the bezel insert. I like the crystal on it. And yeah, overall, it's got a really nice, cool, vintage, old school look to it. And here we are in some direct sunlight, and you can see that red chapter ring there really stands out. But yeah, it's a pure white dial, doesn't have any cream to it that I can see. But yeah, really just a typical Panda layout, and I think it looks good. No AR coating on the crystal, but it's acrylic, it doesn't need it, and I think it looks really good, and the birds agree. All right, let's go throw this on a couple straps, and we'll get back to this review. So here we are on a black leather strap, kind of textured leather. I wish it had more taper on it. It does look a little funny on this, but it doesn't look bad. I do like the stitching kind of matching the dial there. I think that looks pretty good. And here we are on a brown leather strap. You're going to have to excuse my 19mm strap game. It is pretty weak. So don't have too many to choose from. This one is from AliExpress. I'll drop the link down below. Pretty decent strap for, I believe they were like $5. I picked them up for my Seastern S446. So yeah, 19mm. Don't have many. I got one last one that I can throw it on, and then we'll get back to the review. I do like this one though. And lastly, here we are on a CNS watch bands ribbed nylon strap. There's 2 layers underneath the watch there, and it's not a thin watch to begin with. Throw 2 layers of nylon underneath it, and yeah, it does sit up a little bit. Still pretty comfortable, and I think it does look pretty good. But yeah, it definitely wouldn't be my first choice. But there you go, guys. That's all I've got for you. Let's go back inside and let's get back to this review. So let's talk about the case finishing on this thing. So the case finishing is a mixture of brushed and polished surfaces. It is very vintage-like in the fact that it is a circular brushing or an angular brushing on the tops of the lugs there. And it is pretty coarse, but you can definitely see there's a difference in the coarseness between this lug here and this lug here. That's not just the lighting, that's how it looks. This one is definitely more coarse. So the brushing is not very consistent between the 2 sides here, and it's the same thing on the top. This one up here is much more coarse than this side over here. So yeah, just something to know. It's not really noticeable when it's on wrist, but if you're really peeping it, you can definitely see the difference there. Flipping it to the sides here, you have fully polished sides there to the case, nicely rounded, so they give off nice distortion and reflections and stuff. You got drilled lugs, which is a nice bonus. The transition from brushing to polish is actually pretty nice and crisp. I don't see any bleed over or anything like that, so fairly happy with that. Flipping it to the crown side here, you can see you do have a signed VR crown there. Getting up real close, you can see the logo, a V with kind of a backwards R. I do kind of like that. It looks pretty good, and the embossing is nicely done. It's not laser etched or anything, so that's a nice signed crown. You have screw down pushers here, simple polished pushers. There's no design on those or anything like that. Again, pretty nicely done. The bezel itself has a circular brushing on the bottom edge there, and then the bezel insert is a acrylic bezel insert. So really nice. It's not aluminum, it's not sapphire, it's acrylic. It looks awesome. It looks really, really good. You can see when you get at these extreme angles there, you can see kind of the reflection and the edge of the glass. So yeah, pretty happy with that. I think it looks cool, and it was a good choice that they went with the acrylic. Yeah, everything seems to be aligned nicely as well, so no issues with the bezel insert. I think this is one of the better ones out there. The case itself, I think, is really nice. The case back, just a simple polished case back, no design, no nothing on it. Looks okay to me. Simple coin edge style, which I'm not a huge fan of. I wish they would just use a regular one, but my big issue is the thickness of it. I'm pretty sure that one is used to clear the rotor in the automatic version. And it's definitely not necessary on a watch like this. They could definitely shave off a couple millimeters there, in my opinion. But the case itself, it's pretty soft. Surprisingly, there's no real sharp edges on it or anything like that. And I'm overall pretty satisfied with it. It's a very comfortable watch to wear. And besides the inconsistency in the brushing there, it's done pretty nicely. So let's talk about the crystal on this thing. And the crystal is an acrylic crystal. I know some people are going to hate that. Some people are going to love it. I think for a watch like this, vintage size, vintage style, this crystal is perfect. Really, really happy with it. Acrylic crystals, they don't need anti-reflective coating. They're super clear. They got great visibility, great clarity, and great distortion on the edges, as you can see there. So it's a perfect crystal for something like this. It definitely obscures the minute track on the dial, which is I guess true to the original, but yeah, other than that, it's fantastic. I have zero issues with the crystal on this thing. All right, getting up real close to the dial here, you can see we have a matte white dial. There is a very, very slight texture. You can't really see it in person, but it's definitely there when you get it under macro. I think it looks good. It looks really good. You got your black subdials here with those concentric circles. It gives a really nice pattern to it, really crisp printing on those subdials as well. I like the big fat white hands. I think they look great. I think they spaced out the subdials nicely. The proportions on the dial are done nicely. The handset they use, very thin, very minimal. There's a slight facet on the hands there, and they're just simple polished handset. I think they look good. They're a good length. They're quite thin, but I mean, so is the original watch that this is taking inspiration from. So they seem to contrast enough with the dial that I don't lose them. So I am pretty happy with the handset on it. I'm just nitpicking here, especially for the price, but if you look at that minute hand, right where the reflection line is right there, you can see there's some scuffs on the handset. I do see that with my naked eye. It's something I picked up right away, so just something to note. You're probably not going to get a perfect watch. But other than that, everything is done very nicely. You have your red minute track printed around the outside. You do have applied indices as well, but like I said, they kind of get hidden by the distortion of the crystal. And that red, it's very subtle when it's not in a direct lighting condition like this. I barely noticed it. It's the same thing with all of the homages of this style. Just something to note. If you're looking for something easy to read, this is not it. But this is more just the style of the watch back then. You do have your VR logo there at the 12 o'clock, which I actually think looks pretty good. I don't know exactly how to pronounce it. I don't know if it has any meaning, but the VR logo actually looks pretty cool. But yeah, really nicely done. The printing is nice and crisp, like I mentioned, and I really like the handset on this thing. What I don't like is the Lume. The Lume is absolutely terrible. I'm not even going to show you a time lapse of it. It's just god awful, but here's how it looks. So yeah, just something to know. The Lume on this watch is just pathetic. All right, so let's talk about the movement and the crown. So the movement is a Seiko VK63. Like I do mention, you can get this with a 7750 automatic chronograph clone. I'm not really sure about that movement. I know that's a thick movement. I know the subdials are done a little bit differently. So this is just a review of the Seiko VK63. So the VK63, it's got a 3-year battery life, plus or minus 20 seconds per month is the tolerances, but usually it's quite a bit more accurate than that. I've had 0 issues with them. And I've had 0 issues with this particular watch, except one thing, which I'm going to show you here in just a second. So first, I'm going to talk about the chronograph functions. You have your 2 pushers here. Both of them are screw-down pushers, nice and smooth. I got no issues with that. Plenty of grip on them. Yeah, they feel fine. Feedback through the pushers, nice and solid. You get a nice positive click there. Same with the reset one, which we'll talk about here in just a second. So if you notice, the second hand was actually aligned pretty darn good. But one thing I noticed while I was using this thing is this second hand will bend itself. So I think it's because there's so much torque in that snap back action. So when you reset this thing, this second hand just snaps right back to 12 o'clock. It doesn't do a smooth sweep. So when you snap it back, there's so much torque on it and there's so much weight in the head of it. And the shaft of the second hand is so thin that it actually bends the second hand. So I'm going to show you that right now. Hopefully it shows up. Look how bent that second hand is. Are you kidding me? That is absolutely ridiculous. Every time I do it, I mean, that's like 2 seconds off. So what I've done to kind of get that back is you got to go all the way around to get it past the 30-second point. And that way it'll go this way and it'll snap back this way. So I don't suggest doing this. This is a complete deal breaker for me. If you use this chronograph, I suggest don't reset it unless you're really, really close to 12 o'clock position. Okay. Because if you keep on doing this and keep doing what I'm about to do, that second hand is probably going to eventually break. Fatigue in metal, if you bend metal back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, it's going to snap. So just something to note. Let's see here if I can get this thing to align nicely. And we're just a little bit to the right there. So yeah, it's kind of a back and forth type of thing. It's really annoying. It was really interesting. I'm not sure how that got past any, I guess, quality control. Just very unusual. And one of the one of the biggest issues with this watch. I think the watch looks fantastic, but man, that second hand, really unfortunate. So there we go. Took me a few seconds, but I got it back to align at 12 o'clock. So yeah, that is the biggest issue here. Getting back to the movement itself, you have a 24-hour dial here at the 3 o'clock position. You have your minute chronograph counter here at the 9 o'clock position. Then you get your running seconds hand down here at the 6 o'clock position. That one's always running. This second hand here, it only runs while the chronograph is running, and it will stop after 60 minutes. The functionality of the movement, it's been fine for me. I see no issues with it. It's operated by this 3 o'clock screw down crown. Nice and smooth screw in and screw out action. Nice pop out as well. It does have a ghost date position back there. I can hear it clicking around. Pulling it out to the third position there, it does hack the movement. And then you can set your time as usual. Feedback through the crown is fine. Like I said, the screw in and screw out action of all these crowns is really, really nice. So no issues with that. Yeah, I think the movement itself is great. However, that second hand needs some beefing up. That's just something you're gonna have to deal with a watch like this. You're just gonna have to remember, get yourself close to 12 o'clock before you reset it, and then everything should be fine. But yeah, I noticed that thing right away when I started using this as a timer. Yeah, really an interesting feature, well, I guess we'll say. All right, so let's talk about the bracelet. So the bracelet is 19 millimeters, like I mentioned. That is true to the original, and it tapers down to 14 millimeters at the clasp, which is, again, I believe true to the original. So lots and lots of taper there. It's a nice dainty clasp here. We'll just jump right into the clasp. The clasp is nicely branded there. It's nicely finished. It's got a nice brushing on the top, polishing on the sides, a ton of micro adjust there. It allowed me to not have to remove any links. So I'm not even sure what these links are. I'm sure they're split pins. Yeah, they're split pins. So yeah, tons of micro adjust there. It's a nice thin clasp, as you can see there. It's super comfortable. Got really no issues with comfort. Or the way this clasp works is that it's just friction fit. So you pop that open there. So that little hook right there hooks right onto this edge there. So that's where you get your fitment. Positive click there. And I think the resistance on that is pretty good as well. It is a fully pressed clasp. You can see here it is just very, very jangly, very, very jangly. And you can definitely get these things out of alignment. Look at that. So yeah, this is where normally I don't have a problem with pressed clasps, but this one is just bad. Really, really bad, as you can see there. I shouldn't be able to move this thing off center so much that it won't latch. So that's just something you're going to have to deal with. I guess you could find a small clasp and fix that, but it shouldn't even be an issue. That tolerance there is just terrible. Getting back to the bracelet itself, it is a 3-link bracelet, brushing on the top, polishing on the sides. They are solid links, which is nice to see. And then you can see here, it's not your typical 9 millimeter wide middle link there. The middle link here is actually 7 millimeters. So it does have a slightly different look to it. And this is, again, pretty accurate to the original. So yeah, it does look pretty good. I think the taper looks nice. It's very vintage. The bracelet itself feels very vintage. It is rattly. It is jangly. It's not the nicest bracelet. You can see there tons of slop. The actual bracelet itself is pretty tight, but that first link has tons of slop in it. These are hollow end links. They do fit the case curvature pretty nicely, and they are in there pretty solid. You can see there, they can move them just a little bit. It's really not that bad. A lot of the jangle is actually coming from the clasp and not so much the end link. So I don't have a huge problem with that. But like I said, they are hollow. You do have drilled lugs, like I mentioned. The spring bars that they supplied are pretty cheap, pretty flimsy. And they don't really fit in the holes nicely either. So that's probably where some of this slop here on this end link is coming from. Overall, it's a comfortable bracelet. I'll say that. It is comfortable. It's just not the highest quality. It feels very light. And I mean, it feels very vintage. So if you're looking for a vintage looking and feeling piece, this is a perfect bracelet for it, because this is almost exactly what you would get back in 1960. So yeah, just something to consider when you're about to purchase. For the price and for the design, I think it's fine. But yeah, it's not a great bracelet. So there you go, guys. That is the VR chronograph. Really nice size, 37 millimeters. It is a tad bit thick. I wish they would slim that down with a new case back. I think they could do that pretty cheap. The bracelet is very vintage feeling. The movement is great. I've got no issues with that. I love the acrylic bezel insert. I love the acrylic crystal. I think the dial is nicely done. The handset is nicely done. I mean, everything about this watch just screams vintage to me. The look and the feel. And really, the only issue that I have with this watch, besides the thickness, I do think it's a little too thick, is that second hand. With the weird bending of the second hand, it's got a bend to it. So yeah, that's my big concern with this watch. If you are going to buy this watch, and I think it's still a pretty good value, if you are going to buy this watch, you're just going to have to keep in mind that you want to reset the chronograph pretty close to 12 o'clock position. Otherwise, that thing's going to go bend back and forth on you, and then it's eventually going to snap, and you don't want that to happen. So yeah, other than that, I think it's a pretty cool watch. I do really like it. I like the size of it. I like the style of it. I think that's it for me. Thanks a lot for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next one. See ya.